Good evening and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Here's a look at what's coming up. The Trump and Biden campaigns holding dueling press conferences outside of the New York courthouse, marking an unprecedented move by the Biden campaign, how former President Trump is now responding. Trump's legal team and New York prosecutors making their closing arguments in the first criminal trial against a former president. We'll have legal analysis of some of the highlights. And as former President Trump's New York trial enters its final phase, President Biden's campaign making its most direct attempt thus far to wade into Trump's legal woes. Trump's team saying that that's prompted by Trump's lead in the polls. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening to you, Iris. What's the latest move here by the Biden campaign, and how is Trump ultimately reacting?
And President Biden's campaign today made a rare move by holding a surprise press conference right outside of the Manhattan courthouse. And this after the campaign had avoided directly talking about Trump's trial for the past weeks. Biden's surrogates Robert De Niro and two former Capitol Police officers focused on the message that Trump is a threat to democracy.
I don't mean to scare you. No, wait, maybe I do mean to scare you. If Trump returns to the White House, you can kiss these freedoms goodbye that we all take for granted. And elections, forget about it.
Democrats, you are gangsters. You are gangsters. You're salty. You're a nobody. Your movies suck.
The video of De Niro getting heckled by Trump supporters was posted by Trump on Truth Social as a response. Trump's team, in closing arguments today, argued that prosecutors are failing to prove their case and that key witness Michael Cohen is a liar. But prosecutors were still making their closing arguments and told jurors that they don't have to believe in Cohen to find that there is a conspiracy, adding that there is a mountain of evidence against Trump. Trump's campaign, meanwhile, again called this case a political one as Trump's son also weighed in. Watch.
Michael Cohen is the embodiment of reasonable doubt. After months of saying the politics had nothing to do with this trial, they showed up and made a campaign event.
And Biden's campaign was asked about why they're holding a political event right outside of a criminal trial. Their response was they're not there because of the Trump trial, but because of the media outlets who are stationed there. Back to you, Steve.
Well, we even got a forget about it from Mr. De Niro. I wonder if that was scripted or not. NTD's Iris Tao from the White House. Thank you. And in today's closing arguments, Trump's defense saying former President Trump is the victim of criminal conduct in the New York case against him and called the prosecutor's star witness a liar. Prosecutors spending a lot of time responding to the attacks on Cohen's credibility while justifying his bias and defending his anger. Joining me now to assess the strength of the arguments and the jury's presumption is Jesse Bunnell, partner at the Bunnell Law Group. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you back, Jesse. Closing arguments still underway. When will this case ultimately get into the hands of the jury, and when might we see a verdict? And what do you make of the prosecution's case thus far?
Well, that's a great question as for when the jury's actually going to get this case, because the prosecution has been droning on and on in their closing arguments. And even, some left-wing political commenters have admitted that it's a very Miranding closing argument by the prosecutor in this case. Meanwhile, Todd Blanche earlier gave, I think, an absolutely star performance where he just demolished the entire theory of the prosecution's case in his closing argument, pointing out that everything truly does depend on the word of Michael Cohen. And he got up there and pointed and said that Michael Cohen had lied to the jury when he testified. Pointed out that Michael Cohen admitted that he was a thief on the witness stand and was stealing money from the Trump organization. And so Todd Blanche had an absolutely great argument today. The prosecution's argument has been Miranding at best, but the real issue here is the jury instructions. And Judge Merchan, unfortunately, has done everything he possibly could do in order to stack the decks against Donald Trump. And, even going so far as to refusing to properly instruct the jury in the law because he believes it's too confusing, that the law itself is too confusing. So that's really going to be the question. Is Judge Merchan going to successfully be able to convince the jury to convict President Trump based on Judge Merchan's political bias.
Jesse, some great points you made. To your point about the jury instructions from the judge, to those who may not have been in a jury before, describe what that's like when they leave the court and go back into the room there where the judge addresses them, and how critical those instructions are. And also, if you could highlight for us, when it comes to the way that the trial has drawn about right now, where you see this ultimately leading.
Yeah, so two great questions. As far as the jury instructions, these are critically important. These are the instructions that judges typically read the instructions to the jury, and then the juries take them back to a conference room where they take and they deliberate together. And this is how juries know what the law is from the judge telling them what the law is, so they can determine whether or not the law was violated and what process they have to go through in order to determine whether somebody is guilty or not guilty of a crime. So these are critically important, and in this case, they are even more important because this is an untested legal theory. It's actually a bizarre legal theory from the prosecution that somehow a non-disclosure agreement is a violation of campaign finance law. And so it's going to be very, very important for how those jurors how they're instructed, and it's very unusual that the judge has not publicized what his actual instructions here are. The fact that he's been very secretive of those jury instructions is yet another example of how the judge is acting out very much outside the norm in this trial. And as far as kind of where we're going from here and what we see, I mean, it's the prosecution is the one that had to meet the burden to show that each and every element of an offense was proven beyond a reasonable doubt. They very clearly have not met that burden. And you see that through this closing argument that's going on right now, where they're droning on for hours and hours and hours, and by all appearances really boring the jury to death. And so if it's a fair trial, it's very clear it should be not guilty. The problem, like I said, is that Judge Merchan has done everything he possibly could in order to make sure this is not a fair trial.
I mean, I've sat on a jury trial myself before, and the judge naturally commands the respect of the jury. And when they do come back in the room, they weigh in their own way, and whether it's through mannerisms or slight gestures, even eye rolling, you kind of get a sense that they have a pretty strong opinion, and they're leading the jury to a certain degree. Jesse.
Yes, Steve, that's exactly right. The judge, there's all kinds of mannerisms that the judge will always, not always, judges most good judges will be very, very careful to tell the jury, don't look at what I'm doing, don't assume that I want you to reach a certain conclusion. And then good judges try to hold their facial expressions and everything else in check. Now, everybody's human, nobody's perfect at that, but that's what good judges try to do. This judge right now, by the way that he has gone after Trump witnesses and let other witnesses who have been completely out of bounds, like Stormy Daniels, get away with murder on the witness stand. This judge has made it very clear how he feels about President Trump and how he feels about this case. The question is how much that actually bleeds over into the jury's deliberations and ultimate decision here. But it's very, very sad about the mockery that Judge Merchan has made of our criminal justice system in this case. And it's really a case that he never should have been on from the beginning. He was a Biden donating judge. His daughter is financially interested in this case. He should have never been the judge on this case. And instead of recusing himself, he has done everything he can for political purposes to impact the ultimate result of this case.
Jesse, the prosecution tried to mitigate the damage done to Cohen's testimony, essentially trying to rehabilitate him today in the earlier closing arguments, at the same time trying to legitimize Stormy Daniels to make her sort of the motive for the crime that they've tried to depict here. Do you think that the prosecution succeeded?
No, I absolutely don't think that the prosecution, there's any way that they could succeed in that, because, trying to rehabilitate Michael Cohen the way that they have, when Michael Cohen, in my opinion, very clearly lied directly to this jury. And I think that how at this point is the jury supposed to believe anyone who says on the witness stand that he will lie for loyalty. And now that loyalty is to his own financial best interest. And he's testified into his financial interest in this case. He's also, like I said earlier, he's admitted that he stole from the Trump organization. He's admitted how excited he was when Alvin Bragg decided to indict President Trump. This is somebody who has no credibility, and I think that the jury knows that. And really, this case does depend on his word. The prosecution will always say that they have corroborating evidence, but the only reason that they put him on the witness stand is because none of that corroborating evidence that they are claiming makes any sense without Michael Cohen's testimony. They needed him to connect the dots, and all he was able to do is show that he was a liar.
Now, Jesse, with the Biden campaign holding a news conference right near the courthouse earlier today with Robert De Niro joining the campaign, does this sort of support Trump's claim of political motivation? And what does the involvement of a Hollywood actor indicate about the perception of this case?
Oh, I think it absolutely makes it 100% certain that this has been the Biden campaign's effort all along in order to use courtrooms in order to go after and vilify and try to destroy their political opponent, their chief political rival. And it's very telling that today, De Niro said, interestingly enough, he didn't say it was the Biden campaign. He said it was the Biden administration that asked him to be there. Those were his words. And so the fact that, whether it's the Biden campaign or the Biden administration, that they are there in trying to, impact a criminal case for political purposes through a Hollywood spokesman is absolutely outrageous. The only good thing is every American out there right now knows that Hollywood values are not American values. Washington, D.C. values are not American values. And they're not going to be lectured by some, millionaire Hollywood star about how they should vote in a presidential election. And so I think it's going to ring hollow on the American people. But one thing that it absolutely did is show the cards of the Biden campaign and the Biden administration that they are using these cases to try to impact a presidential election, which has never before been done in American history.
Jesse Bunnell from the Bunnell Law Group, really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And coming up, former President Trump making an unexpected endorsement, opposing the leader of the House Freedom Caucus. Meanwhile, President Biden staying quiet on congressional candidates. And welcome back to the Capitol Report. I'm Steve Lance. An unexpected endorsement from former President Trump over the weekend. Meanwhile, President Biden keeping his distance from most political candidates. Our Washington correspondent, Louise Martinez, has more on this. Louise, what can you tell us about this surprise endorsement by Trump over the weekend and about some of his other endorsements?
Of course, good afternoon, Steve. A very interesting and surprising endorsement. This Tuesday, former President Donald Trump took to Truth Social to give his backing to Virginia State Legislator John McGuire over incumbent Congressman Bob Good to be the Republican candidate vying for the 5th Congressional District of Virginia. Now, it's very important to note that Congressman Bob Good is the incumbent. He's also the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. And also, not only 2 weeks ago did Congressman Bob Good travel to New York alongside members of the House Republican Conference to show their support for President Donald Trump outside of that courthouse in New York where he's facing trial. Now, despite that show of support, despite Congressman Bob Good tweeting on that day 2 weeks ago in New York that he stands by President Donald Trump took to social media to say that Congressman Bob Good was bad for Virginia and bad for the United States and decided to endorse John McGuire, former Navy SEAL and current state senator of Virginia. Steve, interesting and surprising endorsement.
Interesting indeed, especially with the congressman there outside of the New York courthouse. I believe it was last week, speaking on the president's behalf. That's Congressman Bob Good, who he endorsed against. Louise, why would Trump endorse the opponent of the House Freedom Caucus chairman, Bob Good, in general? Is the Freedom Caucus not supporting Trump anymore?
I guess that's why it's very interesting, because of course the House Freedom Caucus is located towards the right flank of the House Republican Conference, some of the staunchest supporters of former President Donald Trump. But we also have to remember that Congressman Bob Good endorsed Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida to be the presidential nominee for the Republican Party last year, only changed his mind in January when Congressman Bob Good did then endorse former President Donald Trump. But as we can see in today's Truth Social post by former President Donald Trump, that support was, quote, too late. So now we see former President Donald Trump instead endorsing his opponent, John McGuire. And this is all a very interesting, complicated mix, because we also saw that every House Freedom Caucus member that went with Congressman Bob Good to New York to show support for Donald Trump has received an endorsement from Donald Trump, but not Congressman Bob Good. And then also you have people like Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has announced that she will be campaigning with State Senator John McGuire against Congressman Bob Good. But then you have congressmen like Matt Gaetz and Chip Roy campaigning for Congressman Bob Good. So a little bit of infighting amongst Republicans who are trying to hold on to the majority in the House in the upcoming elections in November, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, we know that Trump values loyalty. We hear that quite a bit amongst his inner circle, and with Bob Good in the early stages of the election, endorsing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, it's certainly possible that Trump hasn't forgotten that. With that said, Louise, what can you tell us about President Biden's endorsements and how they compare to Trump's strategy?
Well, as we just heard, all the details of the convoluted endorsements coming from former President Donald Trump. We know that former President Donald Trump has, this cycle, 2024, Steve, has already endorsed over 90 congressional hopefuls. Very, very stark difference from the Democratic side, where President Joe Biden has only endorsed 2 congressional hopefuls in the 2024 election cycle. So a big difference in between Biden-Trump 2024, but also a big difference in between Biden 2024 campaign that has only endorsed 2 congressional hopefuls to Biden in the 2020 presidential race, when he endorsed over 40 congressional hopefuls. There might be something to do here with congressional candidates, Democratic congressional candidates, not wanting to tie their campaign to the Biden campaign. We'll of course see what will happen in the primaries that are still to come, and obviously in the general elections. But a very stark difference, Steve, from how many congressional candidates both presidential nominees are endorsing.
NTD's Louise Martinez, great reporting from Capitol Hill. Thank you, Louise. In the first presidential debate between 2 presumptive party nominees, President Biden and former President Trump, will be taking place in less than a month. Joining me now to discuss is Aaron Call, the Director of Debate for the University of Michigan's debate program. Aaron Call, thank you so much for joining.
Well, it's great to be back.
It's great to have you back, Aaron. Biden and Trump set the debate on June 27th and September 10th, 2 as of now. If you could, discuss with us the historical significance of these debates, including the timing, the rematch, and the potential inclusion of a third-party candidate, RFK Jr.
Yeah, and all of those criteria, I'd say it's largely unprecedented, and it's definitely going to be different than viewers are used to. We haven't had kind of TV-sponsored presidential debates going all the way back to the initial ones with Kennedy and Nixon in 1960. After that, groups like the Commission on Presidential Debate and the League of Women Voters have run them, but now it's going back to places like CNN and ABC, and so it's definitely going to be different. The audience size may be a little bit smaller given the exclusivity of the networks. I know there's some talk of making it available to everyone, but for competitive reasons, unclear if everyone will accept that. But yeah, it's definitely a totally different world, both candidates and the campaigns had some ill will towards the Commission on Presidential Debates, so didn't mind excluding them at all from this process. But the timing is very unique. I don't think we've ever had a presidential debate start as early as June. It's only a matter of weeks, which doesn't leave a lot of time for preparation from two candidates that are very busy and have a lot of other things going on. Typically, a lot of preparation time with stand-ins and others go into this, and so that's going to be at a much accelerated pace. And so I don't think we're going to necessarily see either of them at their best, given it's been a long time since they've debated, and they're not going to have a lot of time to practice. But I'm glad that we are having debates. There was a lot of discussion that there may not be any at all, but it's good to see, just like in the last time, there'll be two. I think the last thing you asked about was the third party. Not since Ross Perot in 1992 have we had the possibility of a third party. The criteria is very difficult. 15% approval rating in 4 different polls. I think that RFK Jr. is still 1 poll short of that, and then also being on the ballot to have the legitimate chance of getting 270 electoral votes, something that normally doesn't usually matter until the fall. That's at a much quicker process to see if he can reach those very difficult criteria to get into these debates, which would totally change the dynamic of them.
Aaron, you bring up a lot of interesting points. Just how significant is it that Biden and Trump, as you mentioned, bypassed the Commission on Presidential Debates? Does this threaten the Commission's future? And then also the fact that there's not going to be an in-person audience.
Definitely. I think as far as we know for now, the Commission will have no role in this process. They'd already selected sites and dates for September and October, and for various reasons, both campaigns were not happy with the Commission. The first debate, CNN, is going to be in a studio, no audience, and we've seen in recent years audiences becoming bigger parts of the debate, cheering and kind of interjecting themselves in an audible way into these debates. So not having that as a distraction, I think, will make the job of the moderator easier to control what's happening in the debate, and also make it more issue and substance focused, because there won't be some extraneous things from the crowd or the candidates playing to the crowd, interacting with that energy. So it's tougher as a debater, with not knowing how your answers are landing and not having any kind of assistance from your partisan supporters. So it's a different format, and I think it'll be very novel, but overall lead to a better debate for the viewers and those that may still be undecided for who they're going to vote for.
To your point as well, if for some time we didn't know if we were going to have any debates, now we have 2. Aaron Call, really appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Anytime.
And for round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com and download our NTD mobile app. That is all we have for you this evening on the Capitol Report. Thank you so much for watching. From the nation's capital, I'm Steve Lance. Have a great evening. See you back here tomorrow.